Now we will start the keynote dialogue moderated by Jacques Rosselin. So I give the floor to Jacques, who will then call our keynote speakers. Jacques. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jacques Rosselin. I'm a media entrepreneur and I work now for La Tribune, which is used to be a financial daily, now a financial weekly and financial media in France. And I would like to call on the stage Mikael Jensen, who is the boss of Métro International, the pioneer in free printed press, and also Chisholm, who could come with a bottle of water. Don't worry, water is on stage. 3 bottles here, 1 here, so no problem. I thought it would be a good idea to introduce this dialogue with the curation of an article I spotted on Nieman Lab recently, and about Facebook and about what's happening in the consequence of Facebook's IPO on the business. The article said basically that Facebook's disappointing IPO may be indicative of a larger problem, the declining value of online advertising, an inexorable force that will destroy not only Facebook, but the web itself. You see, the article was pretty pessimistic. And the situation is only getting worse as mobile becomes a bigger part of the mix, because Facebook has said it doesn't know how to make money there. So it looks like the only company making money on online advertising is Google, because it's what the guy called a middleman of last resort. The guy who wrote the article is Dan Kennedy, and he has a great blog called Media Nation. So how will we pay for the journalism we need? The answer is far from clear, and of course, it's also far from clear that the public is even willing to pay for what we're selling, either directly or indirectly. As an introduction to this debate, let me quote 4 partial answers to this dramatic situation. First, newspapers should keep printing. And print is doomed, that's for sure, but not in the short term, probably in the medium term. That doesn't mean it's going away entirely. It's just too valuable, said the article, as online advertising is worth scarcely a fraction of its print counterpart. Newspaper companies everywhere are trying to adjust to that reality. La Tribune, for instance, like the Christian Science Monitor 2 years ago, went weekly, from daily to weekly. Politico now publishes a printed version. Libération in France, at once, like 2 years ago, had the project of being published 3 times a week instead of daily. Some dailies in America are planning exactly the same thing. It's a way of keeping a significant part of its print advertising while saving a lot of money. By contrast, dumping print entirely would be a disastrous solution for print media. The second answer is moving to a flat fee ad model. News sites are getting killed by the CPM model, which is based on the idea that advertisers should pay only for the number of times someone clicks on their ads. Now, no one clicks on ads. No one. Some successful sites have moved away from this model, simply charging a flat fee, more, what might be called the sponsorship model. Third solution to this situation: experiment with flexible paywalls. Now, smart, flexible systems, as those put in place by the New York Times and Boston Globe, which allow free sharing via blogs and social media, are a good idea, even if it doesn't bring a lot of money. Last but not least, and I think this conference was really instructive on this matter, was expand non-profit journalism. Local foundations, international foundations, wealthy philanthropists, not to mention readers, can contribute to non-profit local or national news sites. Unfortunately, the nonprofit news movement has failed to take off in the United States, in part because the IRS, the tax organization, has held up application for new nonprofits as the agency ponders whether journalism is an activity that deserves such status. So we need to promote legislation, all here, I think, explicitly recognizing journalism as an activity covered by the regulations governing nonprofits. So this was a long introduction. I hope that you will react on these solutions and subjects. Thanks Dan Kennedy of Media Nation to have inspired this introduction. And I'll give, without further ado, the floor to Jim Chisholm, who is a prominent media specialist, one of the most prominent. Please, Jim.
Okay, well, I'm here today to represent the Luddites in the room. That's anybody who, like me, needs a Zimmer frame to get up onto the platform. And I say that as someone who's spent the last 20 years as a futurologist in the business of newspapers. I've been in the industry for 33 years, but I still confess to being passionate about our roots as much as I am passionate and optimistic about our future. And I just to have a quick quote of Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that is most adaptable to change. And we're seeing that all the time. And it's amazing how many of the biggest media corporations are now struggling. How there's all these newcomers coming along who are threatening, not necessarily successfully, but are changing the way we are. But so here's a question. Is this man past his peak? I've thought for a long time that the Facebook model just ain't going to work. And if you look at the history of all the different media and how long they've been around for, the newspapers, their life cycle peaked after 387 years. By peak, I meant when was the value of the newspaper businesses at its highest and when was circulation at its highest. And that was a very short time ago, 20 years ago. Google, believe it or not, their share price peaked 5 years ago. Right? Facebook, their share price peaked, I think, about 20 minutes after they went to market. Right? And look at where it is today. And what I think is also interesting about this is that if you look at what everybody's reaction, we're all Gadarene swine, as we would say. We're all chasing pigs over the hill because somebody else is doing it. Personally, I think Facebook and Twitter are brand suckers. And those of you that are moving to Facebook and Twitter in the belief that somehow this is going to help you build your audience, I think you're wrong. All you're doing is helping their audience. You're doing nothing to build your own brand. All it is, in my opinion, a reflection against your inability to do this yourself. And I think it's really quite sad that so many, you go onto newspaper homepages and they're right at the top, you say to people, well, leave me now and go to Facebook. Is that marketing? I don't think so. We've always been brand abandoners, by the way. This is nothing new. Look at this chart. Right? This is UK data. Right? Read it from left to right and it shows you readership trends over the decades. Right? So you can see that among 15 to 24-year-olds, today, 30.2% of 15 to 24s read a newspaper, compared with 77% in 1972. Of the over 65s, it's gone from 66 to 35. So you can see the relative declines in circulation. But read this data, and that seems to confirm that as you get older, people read newspapers. It's for old men like me. Right? Watch this. Let's read the data diagonally. So here what I'm doing is I'm following the cohorts. You'll get the slides anyway, you should... Good to see you. But that is representing what happens to each age group as they get older. So people who were 15 to 24 became 25 to 34, 10 years older. It's a sort of fact of nature. And look, as they get older, their reading levels decline. Yeah? So we read most when we are youngest. We adopt media when we are youngest. We take up Facebook when we are youngest. And when my 18-year-old daughter is 30, she won't be using Facebook any bit like she is now. And that's good, because now she uses it 23 hours a day. Look at this one. This is some research from the Netherlands. This chart here is showing people's scores in terms of what they read and what their attitudes are over time between 1997 and 2007. And you can see that some of those values regarding the medium as a stimulant or for enthusiasm are rising. Others have fallen. But look at digital. Here's the same thing for people's usage of the internet. And look what's happening here. Their attitude to social factors and conversation has dropped from 28 points to 24. Their concerns about emotions have halved. The usability of the medium has fallen from 22 to 16 over a 10-year period. What does that mean in terms of people's attitudes to a medium as it evolves? We're all brand abandoners. Here are the world's most successful newspaper websites, in my opinion. So we take Aftonbladet, that iconic brand in Sweden, but look at, this is its homepage. One page. Right. Here's Vorarlberg in Austria. And here's the Mail Online, now arguably the biggest newspaper website in the world. Look at this. Now, that Mail Online page goes on for 11 screens. And what's interesting about all three of those? There's no Facebook on any of them. They don't need to rely on somebody else's brand to be successful. Sorry, having a clicker problem here. Here's another interesting thing. We all think newspapers are dead. Here is the consumption of different media. Broadband subscribers, about 500 million. Internet users, about 1.9 billion. Newspaper readers, between average daily and weekly, 3.2 billion. The number of people who ever watch television, not much higher. And mobile users, of course, well, everybody on earth is a mobile. Most of us have 3. But in fact, the number of people with a 3G mobile is only about 1.2 billion worldwide. There was a long way that other media have got to go before they can be as ubiquitous as a print newspaper. Another reality, and this is reality, and I know a lot of this conference, and quite rightly, is devoted to digital development, but this is the reality of our business. Circulation revenue is accounting for about 45% of our revenue. Advertising is accounting for over 50%. Digital advertising is accounting for about 4% of total revenue. And you can see in green the amount of money that is coming from people paying for content. Right? That's the truth about our business. We can all wax lyrical, we can all read stuff coming out of the Poynter Institute, rubbish that's written by people like me or everything else, but that is the reality, is what is paying the salaries of all the people in this room. Right? But somehow we've abandoned all of this. Mobile, by the way, is about 1% of digital. And if you look at how this is all changing, what is happening is that digital is not compensating, if you look at the graph on the bottom left, for the loss in print. And ironically, and I think quite sadly, if you look at the bottom graph here, I know I'm flicking through these slides very fast, but you'll all get copies of them later. If you look at this graph on the bottom left, what it's showing is in America, newspapers' share of digital, and it was rising until 2006. But in fact, the share of the total digital market is now declining. So in other words, we're not maximizing the asset of the brand that we had in print to be becoming a leader in the world of digital. And that's exacerbated by the fact that analog media, newspapers and television, their share of total advertising is declining at about the rate of GDP minus 10%. And GDP currently is about 1. So that's declining on an annual basis at about 9. So the first thing I would say is that print must remain our foundations. It's going to be 60% of our profits. You know, and every conference we go to, up come our friends from Sweden, Aftonbladet or VG from Norway, and tell you that 50% of Schibsted's profits are coming from their digital activities. It is true. But an awful lot of that is coming from activities that they've created that aren't within their newspaper businesses. Schibsted are unique in that 25% of their newspaper revenues are from online, but they are unique. Right? The reality is the figures I've just shown you. And if you look at this, I thought this was an interesting analysis. Being British, of course, I'm obsessed with what's happening with Sky Television at the moment. So I had a look at where their revenue comes from. And what's interesting is that if you look at Sky TV, their retail subscriptions and their wholesale subscriptions, that is people paying for content, are accounting for nearly 90% of their, more than that, over 90% of their total revenue. In actual fact, their advertising revenue is only 6% of their total. But look how their advertising revenue has been changing and growing. There's something not right about that slide. Oh yes, the 2011, I'm sorry, should be over the second column, not the first one. You can see that their advertising revenue in the last year has grown by about 1/3. So Sky Television, their advertising revenue may be small, but it's certainly growing. But they are getting the vast majority of their revenue from people paying for content. And by the way, only 8% of their audience is news. All the fuss about them at the moment is news. But look at the second table at the bottom. Here I'm comparing a benchmark of newspapers across Europe in terms of their percentage of expenditure between marketing and content. In newspapers, we spend about 7% on marketing. That includes distribution and subscription. We spend 16% on content. Sky TV, they're spending 28% on marketing and over 1/3 on content. I think that tells you something very interesting about our respective business models. With a few exceptions, traditional media are failing to attract, retain, intensify, and monetize their digital audiences. It's a fact. Look at this. Here I'm comparing the output in our traditional media, I'll call it circulation, with the number of pages viewed in a month. So let's start with 100. In print, we have on average in Europe 2.6 readers per copy per day. People come back to our newspapers about 16 times a month. And the number of pages they visit is about 36. So that means the average person reading a newspaper looks at 1,521 pages, right, looking at advertising. Compare that with digital. Well, the number of people who read is 1.28. The number of times they visit is 6. That's actually, I think, quite high. I questioned that figure when I looked at it. The number of pages they go to, 3.4. The total pages visited is 27. In other words, the time people spend with a newspaper is generating over 50 times their likelihood to look at an advertisement than they are in print. And we wonder why we're having problems getting print advertising, digital advertising. This chart, by the way, I specifically produced for Hervé, who's one of the interpreters. I'm famously the man on earth that the interpreters hate the most, but they always do a great job not being able to translate my material. But they are one group of people, just let's all understand, that we always underestimate at international events. So Hervé, this slide is for you. But look at this. This is taking that multiplier I just showed you and taking the data from ComScore across different countries. So in the Philippines, the multiple of pages per circulation is 3.6. In the South American countries, Chile and Argentina, 200 and 300. Because the multiples across all these factors make an enormous difference. So I ask you, how many of these multiples can you affect to take you from the bottom of the list to the top? Small steps are big rewards. How can you attract more people to your brands? Why have you all stopped promoting newspapers in print? Why do very few newspapers carry advertisements in them saying why you should buy tomorrow? Yet every time I look at CNN or Sky or the BBC, every break between every program is telling me why I should be watching so-and-so at some time of night, or coming back tomorrow, or that there's going to be a new series on Tuesday, and we don't do it. It's just laziness. How do we retain people? How do we get them moving between our broadcast and print media, and as I say, coming back? How do we intensify them, getting them to hang around? Why is it that people only visit 3.46 pages every time they look at my newspaper website? And finally, how do we monetize the revenue from that? Here's the same analysis for different newspapers. I've just chosen 3 countries here. But The Guardian, who we heard from yesterday, they get 640 page impressions for every copy they sell. Right? And that's UK only. That's not including international. The New York Times gets 713. But in Germany, newspapers in general get 50. But newspapers in the US get 122. Why is that? Do we know? Do we have the science of what's causing that? Because if you can make a small effect across those multipliers, it will have a dramatic effect on your ability to transform your business. And just taking these, let's look at this. This is the average across those markets. 7.8 uniques per circulation, 4.9 visits per visitor, 3.5 pages per visit. That means 133 page impressions, right? The ability to sell an ad. We can argue about the value of a page impression and an ad, but let's do that in the bar later. Right? Say I improve each of those by 1%. Right? That takes me to 232. Say I can increase that by 2%. That takes me to 371. Sorry, there was a question there. It is, well, okay, but you're correct, but it's 1% of an increment. And yeah, you're obviously better at math than I am at sums. Right, but the implication there, if you say to someone, a member of your staff, can you improve something by 10%? They go, no. If you say, can you improve it by 1%? So small increments in each step of the multiplier, it's just a function of geometry, has a big effect. Right? And these are all things that we can conceive and action in our own minds as a deliverable, rather than being some hypothesis of a mathematical bullshitter like myself. These are, things that we can say to people, how do you achieve? How do you achieve? Right? Print purchase and reading frequency, all of these factors, what the difference it makes. Well, if we improve things by 1%, that's what would happen to newspaper revenues over the next 3 years, and in purple. And if we improve them by 2%, that would be the transformation of our business over the next 3 years. So you can see that by what these relatively small steps, accepting your statistic, this, just by concentrating on this concept of the multiplier, will have a massive effect on how we transform our businesses. And here's another interesting one. This is some statistics I caught up with on the Wall Street Journal. And I read this case study, it was, about their subscriptions. And it was really interesting. I thought, oh, that's quite good. They've gained 1,500 subscriptions. And then I read the statistics. Right? Now, this is a very well-known brand with a very high online audience, selling a very low-cost offer to very rich people, most of whom are getting the offer paid for by their company. They had 32 million page impressions. The click-throughs were 33,000, and the number of orders were 1,500. When you actually look at the conversion levels, 0.1% of people clicked, and 0.005 ordered. Now, what's that going to mean for somebody buying a car, or a house, or insurance, or anything else? Are we analysing these statistics, and firstly, knowing what's going on, and secondly, asking ourselves, what does this mean? How do we make our advertising more effective? Because I find these figures from a highly professional organisation really quite staggering. And by the way, data that I've seen to do with advertisers, the figures are worse. These figures are good. The third thing is the issue of mobile. And of course, we're right to be talking about it. And there's all this talk that by 2017, mobile will be delivering 24% of all advertising. In reality, fixed internet is flattening out. We're seeing very little single-digit growth in internet advertising now. Meanwhile, mobile is going through the roof. There are all these benefits: wireless, locational, it's multimedia, there's profiling, it's transactive, you can e-read, you get your boarding pass downloaded, it's fantastic. But 1% are currently coming from digital. Handheld devices in reality have limitations in terms of format, and in particular how advertising is presented. It has a very effective method of delivering content pricing, because it just goes on your phone bill and you don't notice it. But new concepts are required in terms of advertising. And I think the medium only offers a dramatic audience and revenue potential if we have repurposing. And we're not doing enough work on how we're going to repurpose our content for mobile. And then finally, there's the tablet. And tablets, I think, if you look at how the number of people are buying e-readers, and just looking around the room, you see how many people have one here today. And it's the same in every walk of life. Even my wife, who has barely got out of scratching script on a stone, now has a Kindle and is absolutely just adores it. These figures are dramatic. Laurent told me a while back that reading times of e-reader applications are as high as those in printed, and that's a critical matter when you think back to the statistics I showed earlier. American publishers have found that subscription conversion and retention is higher when it's an e-reading service. A German study found that older people read faster on an iPad, and they consider that to be of great value. E-readers are the accelerator, but to me, this is the game changer. They are demonstrable in terms of being a reading device. Amazon say that 1 in 3 books that are available on a Kindle are now sold on a Kindle. Print levels of intensity are the same. We're not finding that people are only going to their tablet 6 times a month. They're going and they're staying. And people are willing to pay for content. They are appealing to older readers. And of course, it's an excellent environment for advertising. So if I was placing my money today on where I would be investing, this is the area that I would be looking at. And I think there's a lot of work required here. So just in 2 quick slides. Right. We need to be reserving print. Yeah. Levels of purchase, frequency of purchase. My estimate, looking at figures with clients and analysing profit and loss, I think more than 50% of the decline in circulation is because of bad management. I'm not popular for saying that, but half of the decline we're seeing in our industry is because people have stopped investing. Right? We need to get the accountants, put them in a room and have them shot. Right? Because the accountants, right? Accountants can do sums, but they can't do maths. And I was going to call them conversations, that would be too polite. The arguments I've had with incompetent accountants about how to run their business, you would not believe. Half of them, I'm surprised they've got off 4 limbs onto 2. Right? And sadly, they're running our businesses now. And they're destroying our businesses. And I think it's a really sad reflection on where we are, because they can't think long term. They can only think the next quarter's results or whatever. Right? Why are online audiences lacking intensity? Why are we achieving such low levels of readership and so on? We need to look into that. There needs to be a massive global study as to why we are not, with all the fantastic content we have, getting above 3.4 pages per visit. Because that's the average in this room. Right? And so the third part of this is what changes to digital are required. As an avid newspaper reader, I think our big problem is serendipity. A printed newspaper is a formatted series of surprises. You go from page to page, roughly knowing what's going to happen next, as you move from national news to international news to business to comment. But you don't know what those words are going to be. I find when I go on to newspaper websites, and I spend half an hour a day on newspaper websites, and I spend half an hour a day reading my IHT, but on the web I'm going to 6 or 7 papers. And personally, I never read a comment piece on the web, and I spend probably 10-15 minutes on the IHT, on the op-ed pages, reading Paul Krugman, Maureen Dowd, and all these people. Why is that difference there? What science do we require to change that? And finally, we need to continue to invest in print. Publishers in general are not exploiting the multiplier, and I've given you a toolbox. Yep. Bertrand's telling me to hurry up, so I'd better hurry up. What are we doing about all of that? We need research into this, and Bertrand's got to raise €1 million to resolve that, and that's my response to his telling me about the clock. And finally, at a national level, we need greater collaboration. How do we work as publishers together when we're competing now against so many different media? And I'll leave you with this thought. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you very much, Jim. Very interesting. And now, Pierre Michael, maybe you'll have some answers to the questions asked by Jim and by me, as a matter of fact.
I shall do my very best. The newspaper that I work for at least used to be famous for keeping things short, so I'll try to condense my presentation into a 9-minute rush through. If you slip it at some point, I apologize for that. I normally stay away from conferences like this because You guys, obviously not you, but people at other conferences tend to make me quite depressed. Spending time with editors over the last 10 years has been a long, sad walk towards more darker times. And I really think that we have been doing a great job in undermining the future of newspapers. So that's my standing point for being with you. I'm trained as a journalist, and I'm very sad to see all the negativeness that affects our business. I'm going to argue for 9 minutes about why I believe that most of the content in this world over the next 5 to 10 years will become either free or perceived as free. And there's a big difference. Most people today consider their internet access for free because it's on their direct debit account. They don't pay the bill every month, so they think it's free. Actually, it's not. They do pay for it, but they don't consider it a charge. Another big mistake that we've been making in our industry, in my opinion, is that there's a transition of money moving from traditional media into digital media, mobile, and so on. I don't think there's a transition going on. I think there's a transition of time spent on different platforms, but I think there's a loss of advertising revenue. I simply believe that advertising, that it is now cheaper for companies, big brands, official organizations to advertise than it was 20 years ago. And I'm afraid to say that that journey will continue. Why is that? It's a simple reflection of capitalism. If you have endless amounts of supply and you have more or less the same demand, prices will come down. And that's why, as much as I hope that you all will follow what Jim is saying about increasing your traffic on your digital devices, I'm afraid that over the next period of time you will see prices heading towards zero. The CPMs I'm talking about. For some brands, for some high-profile media, very exclusive content, great content, you will probably be able to avoid heading towards zero at the same speed as others. But for the bulk of us, I'm afraid that it will go south, and it will go quite fast. I was trained in newspapers. I'm heading a newspaper group now, a free newspaper group. I am kind of used to being killed all the time, and those who have been in the business for a long time is even more used to it. Back in the 1920s, radio was introduced. Everybody was saying that this is going to kill newspapers. In fact, in quite a few European countries, the newspapers managed to get control over the news transmissions from the radio. So the newspapers formed organizations that had control over the news programs in the radio, simply because they were afraid that it would kill newspapers. When TV came, 40s, 50s, it would kill radio, it would kill theaters, it would kill cinemas, and obviously it would kill every printed product in the world. The same thing happened when internet came, all the rest would die, and mobile will kill everything else on the planet. That is not the way things work in media. I strongly believe in print as a fantastic platform. It has technological beauties that are very difficult to replicate in even the smartest of digital devices. I believe in paper, I believe in print, I believe in paintings towards photographs. I believe in all the stuff that make every platform unique. And I very much agree with Jim that we have been, in the newspaper industry, neglecting the product qualities of any printed media. Having said that, of course, any other platform offers fantastic advantages over print, but had we spent more time in developing the physical product and, of course, also the content, we would have been in a very different situation. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about what will happen with the different news categories. If you analyze what is news really, I guess you can break it down in many ways. One way of doing it is looking at the different categories where we serve our readers. And I'm going to spend a few seconds on each of these categories. I would argue that you can say that all the things that together makes up a news product, be it a newspaper or TV program or radio, online services, would most importantly focus on your area, so your local community. I believe that in the future, 5-10 years from now, your local area news service will be your friend, it will be your allied, it will be your neighbor, it will be somebody who really understands your daily life when it comes to traffic, school, lifestyle, even the way you want to live your life. When it comes to, and I believe that local media, including the traditional media, has a strong role to play in this if they are clever in grabbing the moment. When it comes to your personal interests, so it could be sport, it could be any hobby you have, it could be finance. You will very likely not stay within your local area, but you will go to your experts. You will have quite a bit of loyalty towards your expert, but you will also be open to swap your expert. Translating that into the old newspaper days, you would no longer need to buy 2 newspapers to have the views from 2 of your favorite experts. You could get hundreds of views from experts online, and I foresee that for traditional media, the expert role in your news consumption will disappear from the traditional paid-for newspapers. There might be a role actually in consolidating the views of the experts. And that could be something that traditional media, because of our ability to edit content so that it's strong, easy to read, easy to consume, that could be an area where we have a chance. For curiosity, so entertainment, celebrities, it's really, in my opinion, whatever happens. It could be any website, it could be any mobile device, it could be any media. Loyalty very low, interest very high, but only for a few seconds, and you move on to the next one. Definitely a free area where everything will be free, even for download, sharing, whatsoever. When it comes to that part of your news coverage that handles your country, your big city, or indeed the world, traditional media, obviously because of the strength of the value and the tradition of editing perspectives of what's going on in the world, has a very strong position. I am not a big fan of paywalls. I do not think they will exist for less than 1% of all media that we know today. The rest of us will have to find other revenue models than paywalls. But in the national and especially international perspective, classical media will have a very, very strong role to play for the next 10 years. When it comes to your money, so things you spend money on, your daily consumption, your car, your house, where you want to go on travel, I'm afraid that traditional media will find it difficult to get any role to play in this, simply because digital media who are digital first have so many advantages over the way that traditional media is working. So all the coupon sites, or most of them, all the deals that you can find on the internet, I have to say that the best execution of those I find in digital first media. I believe very much in personalities. I think that media brands in the future will lend itself even more to the strength of the person who is editing or writing or communicating in one way or the other. The perspective of that person is what we can sell, not necessarily only the name of the person. Whenever you engage with a person or a personality and you want to bring him or her to a first-class position where you can capitalize on this person, you run the risk that the person will leave you in 10 seconds. In the future, I think that personal brands running on the internet will, to some degree, be stronger than the classical media brands running on the internet. Oprah Winfrey, within entertainment and infotainment, you can say, is probably one of the best examples. So those are the categories, and as you can see, in quite a few of those, I believe that classical media would have a much, much smaller role to play. When it comes to platforms, I strongly believe that within 5 years from now, you will see the first, if not free, then almost free tablets. I would consider, as a free newspaper group, if I was able to push information to a very low-cost tablet, so say $1 or €1, and production prices will go towards $1, to hand out a tablet to my readers, if I was in a push position. Not an internet device, but a screen, a device where I can push the information. They may then have the opportunity to go online and select, I want fashion, I want sports, I want politics. And I do believe that within 5 years you will see cost coming so much more down that you can hand out tablets for free. Not internet devices, but tablets where you are pushing information. That would be fantastic in China, I believe. I also believe that some of us will be in a situation where we will consider paying for users. In US recently, it's 6 months ago, there was an application launched called, I think it was called Wiggle or Wiggler or something. The basic function is that if you log into that application, it's an app, and you log into your favorite program, you are earning air miles. So the broadcaster or the program is actually paying you to watch and communicate about that specific program. The same phenomenon I think we will see in other medias. When it comes to revenues, I think that the banner ad, the classical old school banner ad prices, as I said, will come towards zero, and in many cases the revenue potential will be so small that you will more or less forget about it. Anything based on data mining, so where you have huge insights to what your readers prefer, what they do, their views, how they behave and so on, obviously prices will go up. And this is a classical old sentence: the more you know about your consumers, the more you can charge for anyone else. For most of the basic media, which will be free on free devices, I believe that the only chance we will have to generate revenue to compensate for the loss of advertising revenue, because it will be a loss, will be to enter businesses where it is strictly founded on e-commerce, on clubs, on Groupons, on daily deals, on anything that can lead a consumer to spend money with our advertiser. The only area where I still foresee a good chance for all of us, and especially high quality old media, will be for brand advertising, where the brand that are advertising in your product, in your newspaper or whatever it is, leans your trust or leans towards your trustworthiness and your classical role in society, because it will place the ad at a premium position, which makes it worth for the advertiser to pay you money. For the rest of us, it will go towards any kind of digital business, non-classical advertising related. Sorry for rushing, but if we should have any time for questions, this is what I had to tell you.
Okay, I'll start by asking a question as usual. You started Metro in what year? When was that? 95, right? Now, so it's been more than 15 years. What is the most significant change for your business, Metro, that occurred in these 15 years?
That's a very good question. The most significant. Apart from us leaving Europe because we had lost faith in Europe and now moving to all kinds of emerging markets, I would say the most challenging and the most interesting perspective from us, or for us right now, is that we are working very hard in moving, I hate the expression, but it's an easy way to understand it, we are trying to move up market. We want to be in a situation 2 years from now where the difference between Le Monde and Metro is not that Le Monde is paid for. Both will be newspapers, and you choose either to read Le Monde because you like Le Monde, or you choose to read Metro. And I think for free newspapers we are in a situation where most paid for dailies are investing, as Jim said, less in content, they are investing less in branding, they are getting further away from their readers, so they are on a decline. We are enjoying pretty good times, and I believe that we should now be in a phase where we are doing exactly what they don't do. So we are investing in content, in pages, in circulation, in getting closer to the reader, all the classical things that newspapers forgot to do some 15 years ago.
Okay, and I have a question, of course, for Jim. You mentioned that there was a lack of crossover between print and digital media.
Yep.
So what shall we do, us publishers and journalists, to find a solution to that?
Okay, the number one thing is that at the end of every story, you print the journalist's email address. I don't think that, I mean, to me, I don't think that's complicated. But you speak to journalists, they say, oh, but you know, I'm very busy. Well, tough, so am I. You know, why do I have to dig around to try and comment to someone, or do I have to go onto some blog and make my expression generally? You know, a funny thing, one of my favorite writers in the world is Paul Krugman. He won a Nobel Prize. I send him an email, you know what, I get a reply. You know, apparently, he's causing havoc among the world's economics at the moment, but he can find time to reply. Right? So that's number one. We're meant to be an interactive medium. The days of preaching and firing out our opinions to others are over. That's number one. The second thing is we don't make enough in most newspapers. I know there are exceptions, but we don't make enough of the interactivity we get, the feedback. You go to so many newspaper websites, and the richness of the material in comments below the story itself can be fantastic. Now, I have a word of caution, and that is I don't know if any of you, when you go in a taxi, you notice that taxi drivers are obsessed with listening to talk radio. You know, they're always listening to phone-in programs. And I've always had a theory that 80% of people who phone into programs are axe murderers. Right? I may be alone in this idea, right? But my worry about a lot of bloggers is they're simply axe murderers who can type. They type with one hand and they have the axe in the other. Right? And so one has to be careful. But there is this fantastic richness of comment that so often doesn't reappear back as the follow-up to a story the following day. What's that? That's just laziness. That is so simple. It's so inexpensive. And by consciously thinking, how do I get my media to be more participative and for the print to interact with the online, you know, I think we can, it's a very simple way of working on what I call a multiplier.
Okay, I'll just, before giving you the floor, if you have any questions, prepare them. I'll just say that my personal experience in information is that what is new in the last 5 years, I'd say, is that I enjoy as much reading and consuming information and talking about it with other people. And the conversation on information is taking me as much time as the consumption of information, and I dig that. Okay, any questions? There's Monsieur Dufour, a publisher, successful French publisher.
Good morning.
Tu peux te présenter peut-être?
Yes, Michael, good morning. So I'm the editor and founder of daily newspapers for children and teenagers in France. I'm very interested in what you said about one day we will give sort of a cheap tablet and push content, maybe even videos to our readers. I'm already dreaming of sending that to my 150,000 subscribers. Are you planning to do it?
You got to find the tab.
We are actually looking into it. It sounds strange, but we are. Metro is part of a group who's also very strong in telecommunications in emerging markets, so Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And I'm not an engineer, and I'm not used to producing tablets, but I'm convinced that there's a very good chance that within 5 to 7 years, the world will see a tablet, might only be black and white, which doesn't need battery, and that is so cheap to produce that you can give it away for free. And the key to that is that I want to maintain my position as the editor. So one of the sources for transmitting, because this will not be an internet device, but it will very likely be transmitted via DVB-M, so digital video broadcast for mobile. I want to be in the position, as I am today as a newspaper editor, where I say, this is what you're going to read, these are the ads you're going to look at. You have the ability to select, the areas you want to read about. But I've been speaking with a few engineers in China and US who are saying that it is not at all impossible that device will come at a production cost around $1, $2 in 5 to 6 years from now. No batteries, no online. If you break it, you'll get a new one. The key is, can you maintain your situation as the editor who is pushing information? If you can communicate on that device, you're dead. So it will not replace your phone, your whatever, but it will be a traditional push media on a handy platform.
Okay,
but François, how much does it cost you? I mean, for those of you who don't know François' excellent product, it is distributed by the postal organization in France overnight to the homes of 157,000 children, right? But that must be costing, I don't know how much per home to do that. I bet that's a greater cost than the cost of a Kindle. Even if it's just amortized over a year. Okay, you're going, right? But what's interesting in the experiments that people have made with this is if you say, well, you can have your quotidien a petit quotidien on the iPad, say, or Kindle, right, that the offer is extremely interesting. And what you then do through a walled garden is offer people books, so it could be children's games, which is another side of your business, of course. So you're then offering them a whole range of other products, which in their own right then become a profit stream. So the economic model I think, is incredibly compelling. Because it's reducing your costs and it's increasing your business opportunities and new product lines.
Yeah, at La Tribune, we thought that as soon as we can find a tablet, 100 euros, then we can give it to subscribers.
Right.
And I subscribed to a phone company, and I got my free tablet.
Well, if that's what you're looking for, you should go to the airport because you can buy a tablet at 69 euros.
Very good. So it's time to give them to subscribers. Yes?
Bob.
Est-ce qu'il y a un micro baladeur, s'il vous plaît?
Right. My name is Kazim. I'm from Nigeria with technology providers to the media industry. My question goes to Mr. Jensen. He said he's not a fan of paywall. Could you shed some light on what informed this perspective and what are these other revenue models you said media should look at? Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? There's a quite bad sound up here.
Yeah, you said you are not a fan of paywalls. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. Could you shed some light on what informed this perspective? Why did you believe that paywall is not a good revenue model for media? Yeah. And what are these other revenue models that you think we should look at? Thank you.
I think that the top 1% provider of content in each category will have a chance to go behind a paywall. Maybe the top 5%. But the rest, the 95% who are not perceived as very high quality content provider, be it in finance or any other category where you normally have a willingness to pay, I don't think they will have a chance. I think the money goes to the winner. There might be a bit of money for number 2, the rest, nothing. That's the main analysis. The second is that you will have so much competition from what you could call unestablished media brands, be it persons, organizations, people with a political point of view, which in my opinion is fine, any kind of entity that are competing for what you are very good at. And because accessibility to what they do is so easy, if you look at the world right now, I don't think that New York Times is successful in what you're doing. And if only journalists were using spreadsheets more than they're using Word documents, you would be able to do the same analysis. They have 500,000 subscribers to their digital services. Around 300,000 of those are newspaper subscribers already, so they more or less get it for free. 200,000 are paying for the content exclusively on digital. New York Times themselves have said that over time a realistic level for monthly payment is $10. So that makes it $2 million per month in revenue from paid for content for New York Times. $2 million is a happy weekend in the newsroom of New York Times, and that's it. You haven't covered the rest. So if they are going to build their business model on that, they will either have to find 2 million people who are willing to pay $10 a month, or they're going to reduce their newsroom drastically. If they do the latter, I bet you that what Jim was explaining on how newspapers have been acting, decreasing investment, decreasing the way that they want to attract readers, will happen for New York Times, even though it's a fantastic digital product. So even for the best of brands, the best of producers of content, you have to be number 1 or number 2 to be able to charge for it. I hope I'm wrong, by the way.
A last question, okay, two last questions. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, Bob Satchwell, Director of the Society of Editors in the UK. I just want to add to this warm breath of optimism about print. I've just taken a phone call from a chap called Sir Ray Tyndall, who owns a lot of little weekly newspapers across Britain. Never been in debt. He founded his company on a £400 and he's got all these papers now. Last Friday he came to me and he said, I'm just off to see the editor of one of my papers in South London and I'm going to ask her if she will found 6 new newspapers. And do you think she will be up for it? And I said, I'm sure she will. He said, do you think she'll be up to doing it by a week on Friday? In other words, a fortnight. And I said, I'm sure she will. He's just phoned me and he said, he made the announcement to staff last week, and I'm now about to break an embargo because at noon today he's going to announce to the world, or at least to Britain, that these papers are going to happen. And what the point he made was because there were 2 Saturdays, 2 Sundays, and next week we're celebrating the Queen's Jubilee in England, that means there were only 6 days to produce these 6 newspapers. And he said, what the editorial team are doing is that, and I want you to come to the launch of these papers next Friday, is that they decided that 6 weren't enough, so they're going to launch 7. And that's what they're going to do in a fortnight. Now, just wait until Sir Ray, who's well into his 80s, suddenly realizes he's now discovered the telephone and the mobile phone because he's just got me on the phone. Wait until he finds out about tablets and things, and then we'll see the real world of developing in how local newspapers can work.
Okay, thank you. I hear that Warren Buffett is buying local papers like crazy also in the States.
And railways.
And railways, right, to convey them. Yes, introduce yourself.
Can you take one more? This is John, a question.
The last one.
Okay. I work for the New York Times. I just wanted to correct a number of assertions that were just made. The facts that or the information you provided about the digital subscriptions are flat out wrong. We do have somewhere north of 450,000 digital subscribers, but not one of them is connected to the print subscription. All of the print subscription customers, or the vast majority of print subscription customers signed on their own, transferred their subscriptions over to digital. They did it for free. Yes, they get it, but that's hundreds of thousands of other people. The 450,000 figure that gets cited quite often, and actually I think it is somewhat more than that, are digital-only subscribers. Now, some of them actually do get a print product attached to that, but they came to us outside of the original print subscription process. I can't address what you said about what we do on weekends, but I'll only deal with the digital subscription issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your attention. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Pierre.